Everybody, today's talk is on the back to basics for nutrition to help fuel your workouts. All right, so just a little bit about me to start, just so you know who you're listening to here. So my name is Tiffany. I'm a board certified and licensed nutritionist, and I came to this space because I had struggled with ongoing symptoms that were undiagnosed for many, many years, only to then be diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And what really changed it for me, besides getting on some medication to help with that, to replace the thyroid hormone, was digging deep into the nutrition like I had never done before. And that's how I was able to thrive and not just survive and actually start to feel and function like a normal human being. So I'm here to talk to you about that today because you might be dealing with some of these symptoms that is very common when people start having hormonal imbalances or have been dealing with a lot of stress or maybe not eating the best diet. And so this is where we need to not start another new diet, not get into a new fad, um, not stop eating. We need to actually fuel our body. And sometimes it takes just throwing out all those rules about food and nutrition and then just getting it back to basics. So that is what this talk is about today. All right, so the next thing we want to look at is just thinking about how's your nutrition status? Do you lack energy? Do you have a lot of aches and pains? Do you struggle with poor gut health? And you might know that from having heartburn, acid reflux. Might have pain in your gut after you eat something. You might have constipation or diarrhea or fluctuate between the two. If that's something you struggle with on an ongoing basis, this is something that you can improve just by getting your nutrition back. And like I said, just getting back to basics. Do you have dry, flaky skin? The skin is really telling about what's going on in the inside. That's a little reflection of what is happening on the inside when it shows up in your skin with eczema, with rashes, with just random things like that. That is something that shows up, and our skin tells us something. Also, do you feel like you're anxious a lot? Do you have, depression, anxiety? Do you have, other mental health things? Do you struggle with attention and focus? Those are all things that can be really supported and helped when you're dealing with nutrition. A lot of times people think that's separate, that nutrition is only for losing weight, but that is far from the truth. And this is what we'll talk about a little bit today. I won't go into all the details of all of those things because that could go on forever. But we need to really dial in this for basic reasons to not only fuel your exercise, but also you might notice a lot of these other symptoms will subside once you get going on your nutrition. So, if you're feeling unmotivated to motivated, cravings, mental fatigue, brain fog, that kind of thing, that's a big factor with your nutrition. All right, so probably when you've been starting your new workouts, you're probably thinking about goals a little bit. You don't have to, set anything specific in here for me, but I'm just trying to give you things to think about when you're setting your goals for your workouts. What is the end game for you? Are you going to be doing some of this stuff long term, or are you going to do it just for the next 10 weeks or however long the programs are for? What do you want to get out of it? Do you want to sustain the health, the fitness, the nutrient status, or are you looking to just lose X many pounds by X time? We need to kind of look at that because you might choose to do things differently based on those goals. And then the other thing is like, will you be able to do it? Sometimes when we start these things, we embark on these new changes, it's kind of like a little bit scary, because maybe things haven't worked so great before in the past. Maybe we self-sabotage, maybe life gets us in the way or gets in the way of us. I know just this spring I was doing a program with a pop-up program in my group. We had about 20 people in there, and I got so sick that I couldn't even do it. And that was my plan, was to do it with them, and I couldn't even do it. So stuff happens, life happens. So how do we sort of plan for the unplanned, and how do we plan to be off plan and keep going so that we can obtain some of the goals or attain some of the goals that we're shooting for? Okay, so this is what we're talking about, is this back to basics eating Just gonna put my phone on DND here. Back to basics eating, instead of looking at all the food groups that you maybe learned about back in elementary school or seventh grade health class or whatever it was, I like to focus on three groups. I want to talk about proteins, I want to talk about fats, and I want to talk about carbohydrates. Those are the macronutrients. Everything we eat is in one of those categories. Some of the things will kind of blend between the two. Okay. Sometimes we have fat and protein in one type of food. Okay. So basically, that's what you want to do when you're looking at your food versus having X many vegetables, this many fruits, this much dairy, this much grain. We're just going to put them all into, more narrow-minded focus: proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Okay. So this is something that gets in the way with people because we get, again, kind of all those food rules. And this I find is very much easier for people, and people start to have results and start to feel better when we just break it down and make it simpler. Okay. You've got so much going on in your life. Let's just see what we can do to make this as easy as possible. Also, I should say, if you do have any questions along the way, make sure that you just enter your question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask me the question. I'm just going to check up here. If I don't see something and you're waiting for an answer, turn on your microphone and interrupt me, okay? Because I might not catch it. So back to basics eating. Let's talk about the protein. We need to think about how much protein do we actually need? What do you actually eat? And what does protein do for you? I could do a whole talk on just that, on what proteins do for us. So that might say to you that it's very, very important. And I think for women in particular, I feel like we have been sort of told that it's not that big a deal for us and that we want to make sure to be careful with it because we don't want to get bulky or whatever, especially for lifting weights. And it's really, really hard for us to get bulky, number one. It's hard for us to build too much protein. So we need to fuel ourselves with protein to meet basic needs just to maintain the skeletal muscle that you have. Because I'm hoping that one of your goals that you set out for this program was to maintain your skeletal muscle, build muscle, and lose fat versus I just want to lose weight. Maybe people are in here that don't even care if they lose weight. That's not their main goal. Most people seem to have that as part of it, but maybe it's a recomposition. Maybe if you lost, 5 pounds of fat and gained 5 pounds of muscle and you weigh the exact same thing, you're just going to look and feel a lot better and be stronger and have more energy because of the protein that you're eating. And on top of it, if you are eating or taking any kind of peptide weight loss medication like Ozempic or even the compounded ones, if you're not getting a minimum of 100 grams of protein in per day, you are going to lose muscle and you're going to be really upset at the end of the day if you have restricted your eating because the medications make you lose your appetite, or if you're on purpose restricting your eating and you're not eating very much, you're going to lose muscle and you're not going to be able to build it. You're not going to be able to recomp your body. So that's why this is part of this get back to basics and find out where you are. So one of the action steps that I always tell people to do is start with where you're at and make it better. But if you don't know what you're doing right now for protein or anything else we're talking about, you don't know where to go. Okay, so we have to have your baseline. So I always recommend people take out, I don't care if it's a sticky note or if they want to use an app like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or something like that. And I want you to track at least your obvious protein. And what I mean by that is your chicken breast, your steak, your eggs, your cottage cheese, your Greek yogurt, the obvious proteins that you are eating. I want you to track that for 3 to 5 days of sort of your average way of eating and figure out what your average intake is. And then we know that there are some proteins in other types of food, but they don't add up to big amounts of it, but you probably get a little bit more than what your average is. I just want to have you find out where you're at, get your baseline so you can know what to do from there. So your first protein goal should be 100 grams minimum. Now, caveat for that. is if you have been diagnosed with a kidney disease of some kind, ignore what I'm saying and default to what your provider is telling you about your protein intake. Okay, that will trump what I'm saying. So if you don't have that condition, if you don't have a kidney disease or you don't have some other reason where you can't absorb proteins or whatever, then your goal is going to be 100 grams minimum. That is going to maintain the skeletal muscle that you have, and that's going to, just keep you healthier with, sorry, my throat is dry, help you with building muscle. It'll help you with your skeletal system. It will help you build hormones, make hormones. It'll help you to, I don't know, your hair, skin, and nails. It's your immune system. It does absolutely everything in your body. Proteins do everything. They are enzymes that make reactions happen in your body. And if you're not eating enough, you're not going to be able to have enough of that to be able to make your body work well. It doesn't go as well if you're not eating the protein. So that's what proteins do for you. Like I said, I can do a whole talk just on that. But you need to start with that 100 grams minimum. And there's reason for that. There's that threshold. If we reach that 100 grams, that passes the threshold of getting this one specific amino acid in enough so that it stimulates muscle cell protein synthesis, where our muscles can actually keep turning over and building and, at least maintain where you're at. Okay. Then after you get to that first goal of 100 grams minimum, if you're not already there, then you need to stretch that a little bit. So if you know what your ideal lean body weight is, then I want you to try to eat between 80% to 100% of that in protein, based on your ideal lean body weight. So example, if you're weighing about, or if you want to weigh 150 pounds, I want you to eat up to 150 grams of protein, especially when you're training. If you're using your muscles and you are lifting heavy things, you want to eat more protein. Okay. So I'm giving you that range of zero point 0.8 to 1. So just to make sure my math is correct. If you want to be 150 pounds, you're going to want to have a minimum of 120 grams of protein up to 150 grams protein, especially while you're doing, intense workouts, lifting heavy things. Okay, one more just disclaimer in case somebody comes in late or didn't hear it the first time. If you have a kidney disease and your doctor has told you to eat minimal protein, that's what you default to. You do what they say. But if you are not going, if that's not your situation, then I want you to start with that 100 grams minimum, build to that. And then once you do that, build to the next. Build to, 110 grams and then 120 grams and then, whatever your threshold is. Now, sometimes it might be hard to consume more protein, and I don't want you to do it with protein products. It's okay to use those as a crutch, to when you're traveling or if you need something quick or whatever. But on a regular basis, I don't want you drinking 3 Premier protein shakes just to get to 90 grams protein. That is going to cause you probably to gain weight. If you only rely on protein things like protein granolas, protein cereal, protein chips, protein, that kind of thing, that is not what I'm talking about. I want real whole food protein 80 to 90% of the time. Okay, just do that as much as you can. It sometimes doesn't feel great if your gut isn't healthy either. If you have if you have low stomach acid, it's going to be hard to break the proteins down. Protein structurally in the molecular level is very large, and it takes the hydrochloric acid in your gut to break it down. Most people, I do GI testing, and I would say most people have low stomach acid. Not everybody, but most people. And if you have low stomach acid, that's when you're going to have where the protein feels like it sits like a rock in your gut for too long. If you have that sensation, chances are that's the situation. So it takes a little time to build up to it. Just be patient with it. You don't have to get to the 150 grams or whatever your ideal lean body weight is today. Okay, it's a marathon, not a sprint. All right, any questions about proteins? I'm gonna move on. We're going to look at produce, and I'm sort of lumping that in as carbohydrates, although it's not all the carbohydrates. I just want to see one thing. Yeah. Um, we're going to talk about the produce, and we're going to talk about carbohydrates in the sense of, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, and grain. Okay, so that's not just produce. I should have added the other things in there, but those are your carbohydrates. And if you are metabolically stable and if you're basically at your ideal weight, if you don't struggle with blood sugar issues and that kind of thing, you can kind of do the carbohydrate to protein ratio about the same. So like a 1-to-1 ratio protein to carbs. And it doesn't have to be exact every single day, but just generally speaking, you can probably consume the same amount of grams of carbohydrates as you do protein. Um, Typically, if someone is metabolically unstable, one indication of that is having excess weight. And so that would mean that you would probably want to do maybe a 1 to, I don't know, zero point 0.8 ratio, something like that. Or I'm just going to use like if 150 grams for protein, I'd probably say that a person should, if they're trying to lose weight to get to that 150, I would say they should probably eat 100 grams of carbohydrates. Just put it a little bit less. And we need to think about how many plants do you eat each day? So remember I talked about I want you to have more whole foods for the protein, same for carbohydrates. Nobody got overweight by eating, broccoli or apples or bananas. And I know people are afraid to eat some of these things because they're higher in sugar. And if you are completely metabolically unstable and you have dysregulated blood sugar, they can cause a problem. But if you start adding them and eating them with enough protein, you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to tolerate it. It might take some time, but you need to add a variety of carbohydrates in the form of plants. We don't want ultra processed carbohydrates. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we're going to eat, chips and salsa, right? That's not necessarily like the best thing, but we're going to do it. So there's reality. You have to balance everything out. But you want to make sure you're getting 30 types of plants per week. Okay, so that sounds insane sometimes, but just be sure to understand that I'm saying not just vegetables. I'm talking about vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, and grains. You probably do close to that already if you were to kind of assess what you're doing. So for a few days, on average days, I would take, again, that little sticky note or notepad or whatever you have where you're tracking your protein. I would just make little tick marks of all the plants that I'm eating. And the goal is to get up to 30 types per week. And the reason for that is scientific. There's studies that have been done about the diversity and the balance of the gut microbiome. And people who ate at least 30 types of plants per week had overall better health in all situations, even more so than a vegan, someone who describes himself as a vegan who only eats plant-based foods. There's a lot of junky plant-based foods, so I'm not talking about like Boca burgers and I can't remember what that other thing is called. It's a fake meat kind of thing. Those are pretty inflammatory, so I'm not really talking about those. Again, whole foods as much as possible. Try to do that more often than not. So if you have a better varied diet, that is setting, with regard to the plants, it is setting your gut microbiome to be diverse and balanced, which gives ultimate health because those fibers in those foods will provide the different prebiotic fibers. Like it's kind of like setting the groundwork, seeding the gut to have this proliferation of a healthy and balanced microbiome, which sets you up for overall better health. So that is something about getting back to basics. If you have gotten to this space of, doing intermittent fasting a long time for, like often, but also for many months or years, now it's probably time to bring in a regular meal where you're eating 3 meals a day and adding more produce, adding more plants to your diet. And if you become very, keto or very carnivore or something like that, where you're limiting what types of foods you're eating and have been afraid to eat carbohydrates. Maybe it's just like what kind of carbohydrates you should be eating. So kind of, I want you to get back to basics and just kind of rethink that whole process and just think about how can I fuel my body so that it works properly and that it can actually benefit from these workouts that I'm going to embark on. How do we fuel our body, like dump the nutrients into it? Because those, I always tell people, I used to teach biology and all those like little wheels and cycles that you learned in high school biology that no one really cares about except for the teacher. Those things go, they spin, those little wheels and cycles go because of the nutrients that are broken down from the foods that you eat. You're not getting those nutrients in Cheetos or ramen noodles or whatever. So if we're only relying on ultra processed foods, you are not going to feel well. You're not going to fuel your workouts well. You're just not feeding it well. So that's what you need to do. So you're going to do a little protein assessment on yourself for 3 to 5 days. You're going to do a little plants assessment. How many plants do you eat in a week? Just check that off for, or actually over 3 days or something. You can do it for a whole week if you want. But if you're getting up to like 20 different plants on day 3, you're probably good to go. Just keep working towards that and adding variety. So as far as the carbohydrates to eat, that is where you might want to fluctuate a little bit. Keep your protein stable with your, for the most part stable, where you maybe get your minimum and then go up to your max so that whatever that ideal lean body weight is. But carbohydrates, you can let that fluctuate a little bit. Standard American diet is up to 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. And it's not from whole foods, I can tell you that. It's not from what's in this picture. So that is not a good thing. If you are eating 150 grams of produce and, healthy grains and nuts and seeds and stuff like that, you're going to be a lot healthier than eating all the, processed things. Okay, so I think I skipped fats in here. Okay, so let's just go back to this this page. We'll talk about fats. This is the other macronutrient that you need to consume. Now, often it comes along with the protein. If you're eating, fattier cuts of meat, or if you're doing like wild salmon or things like that, they're just a little bit fattier, right? So you're already kind of getting some. But if you are having some roasted vegetables and you cook them in some kind of oil or you put some butter on it, that's perfect because that's going to help you absorb the fat soluble nutrients from those foods and also keep inflammation down in your body. And if you're busting your butt at the gym, you are probably gonna, drive some inflammation for a little while. It might be temporary, which is good, but you might want to make sure that you're getting good healthy fats to round it out. And it also increases your satiety from your meals. And I guarantee if you are struggling with cravings right now, a lot of people do, and if you're having crashes of energy at 3 p.m., if you make sure you're dialing in that protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you are for sure going to make just that alone is going to improve and your cravings are going to decrease. If you are filling up on protein, eating some produce and getting some healthy fat in there, you're going to increase your satiety, decrease your cravings, improve your energy, and improve your brain fog. So as far as fat goes, I mean, that's kind of a variable too as far as how much. But if you prioritize the protein first and then figure out, okay, what's my carbohydrate going to be? And then does the fat go with it? Would my carbohydrates benefit for a little bit of fat put into them to help with absorption? Then that's perfect. That's all you need to do. A little pat of butter, some olive oil dressing on your salad or whatever it's going to be. That's going to be perfect. All right, any questions on proteins, fats, and carbs? Okay. Next, like how do we reduce sugar intake? So we'll naturally do this by eating the things I told you before on the last page. So if you're prioritizing your proteins, healthy carbohydrates, and healthy fats, this stuff is going to be a lot less appealing. You're not going to even be drawn to it. You'll start losing the taste for it. Your palate will change. Then if you kind of prioritize when you do something sweet, if you're doing more, if you're cooking or baking with stuff, you might want to do like monk fruit. That actually works pretty good one-to-one for replacing sugar and things. Might use stevia instead of the artificial sweeteners and things like that. Sometimes those trigger more cravings. But doing all of that will help to reduce your sugar intake. And if you are prioritizing, again, those whole foods, your sugar intake will be lower in general. So think about it. Every carbohydrate, whether it is a carrot or popcorn, or candy, turns into sugar. Okay? They all turn into sugar. But you'd think that like a big old bowl of broccoli, that's going to turn into sugar to some degree, but it's going to turn into like minimal compared to, a giant tub of popcorn. And I'm just going to give you an example, like a commercial bagel, like the if you do two sides of the bagel, I can't remember exactly the amount of carbohydrates are in those, but they convert into between 6 and 12 teaspoons of sugar. That's how you can kind of equate that. But a bagel isn't necessarily sweet, right? Unless you're buying a sugary bagel. But if you're buying just your even like a whole wheat bagel, that will convert into that much sugar in the form of glucose. So just because it's not tasting sweet doesn't mean it's not sugar. So that's the kind of thing that you need to think about. And again, it's not to say you can't ever eat a bagel, right? But you want to make sure you have a protein with it, and you want to make sure that you have, a good fat with it too. So that's how you can mitigate that response. In my programs, I do a lot of continuous glucose monitor thing. I have a program that we go through that and we look at real-time data for people. And so that's how this whole thing, this back to basics thing has been created even before I did the continuous glucose monitors. And balancing blood sugar is key critical for building your energy and then being able to fuel your workouts and to just, get through your days and actually feel and function like a normal human being. Because some people are really struggling, especially as, hormones start to change and that kind of thing. It starts earlier than we think. So, reducing your sugar intake just by converting to more whole foods and more of the whole food plants is going to be a game changer for you. You'll notice a big difference, probably in inflammation, if not fat loss. Okay, so again, how to keep reducing that sugar intake, that balanced eating, boosting your protein, increasing your fiber, and eating that balanced macro diet, just that naturally, I kind of already said that will naturally reduce the sugar cravings. And then if you are adding all those plants that I was talking about, you're going to be healing your gut. You're going to be rebalancing the gut microbiome, and you're going to just like get rid of the cravings and just again improve overall health. And that study showed overall health. I'm talking things like autoimmune disease, mental health conditions, cancers, like everything it was contributing to by having that variety of plants. So that's how you will just naturally reduce your sugar intake. All right, so let's talk. Any questions on any of that before I go to the next section? Okay. So how do we work out and fuel our workouts? And I have to admit, I'm not always great at this, of the perfect timing of all this, because I wake up and I, will mostly work out in the morning, but I'm not super hungry, so it doesn't appeal to me to have a little snack before eating or before working out. But when I do, it makes a big difference, even if it's a complex carbohydrate or something with some protein. So basically 1 to 3 hours before you work out. And I know sometimes, depending on some people I know are working out super early, others might be doing it after work. So it really depends on what you're doing and what you're feeling like, but it will, make a difference if you just try with doing it and try it without doing it and see the difference. So avoid really high fat or high fiber right before the workouts. That will just slow your digestion and make you feel kind of bogged down. So having a little combo of a little protein, a little complex carb is going to be good. It can just be kind of like a mini meal or a snack kind of size thing. So there's some examples: Greek yogurt and banana, rice cake and turkey, hard-boiled egg and apple. Even if it's half an apple, just a little something to start that up for your workout. And then I do recommend for women in particular, men too, but women, can really benefit. There's a lot of studies showing that, especially when we start getting through hormone changes, really taking a good quality creatine in, with your workouts is very important for muscle recovery and helping you build the muscle. And then after workouts, 30 to 60 minutes post workout, doing kind of a protein and carb is going to be really good. Keep your fats moderate so that you can absorb the nutrients quickly. Fat is awesome, helps with satiety, but it can kind of keep blood levels up of the nutrients for a longer time before it can absorb, so that it stays with you. So it's not maybe ideal when you're trying to replenish your body. So, and maybe this depends on the type of workout you're doing. If you're doing kind of a hardcore, intense workout that day, maybe that post-workout meal is going to be a lot more important than on days where you're maybe just needing to rehydrate or something. So kind of play it by ear, but an example of this would be grilled chicken and a sweet potato, cottage cheese and berries, protein smoothie with fruit, something like that. And if you're working out in the morning, maybe grilled chicken and sweet potato isn't as appealing, but you can, adjust to your liking. Any questions there? My dog is visiting me right here. Then with hydration, this is kind of the most underrated performance tool. You probably heard that by the time you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated kind of thing. So, I don't know if that's how dehydrated someone is when they first start feeling thirsty. I don't know if anybody's ever identified that in any kind of study, but even 1 to 2% dehydration can lead to that mental fatigue, reduced strength and endurance, slower recovery, workouts feel harder, just kind of feel sluggish and bogged down. Hydration is key to get things flowing, get your lymph tissue flowing and keeping that cleaned out so it doesn't get bogged down. Really important to keep doing that. And then there's not really like how there's RDAs for nutrition and stuff, nutrients and things like that. There's really not one for water. Everybody has different needs, but kind of a rule of thumb, especially if you're working on improving water intake, is you want to use your weight, have half of your body weight in ounces. So if you're 150 pounds, you want to get at least 75 ounces of water, fluid each day. But the thing is even if you drink water, if if it's not getting into your cells because you don't have enough electrolytes, then it kind of doesn't matter. You can be drinking all the water in the world, but if it can't get into your cells, you're still dehydrated. So that's where you might want to use some kind of electrolyte powder. You might want to just like the picture, have some lemons and maybe put some sea salt in your water. And what I would kind of do is think about if you're doing an intense workout, drink your water and whatever you're doing during your workout. But then outside of that, then start with your 75 ounces, or in this example, as your minimum to get in. Kind of drink what you're doing as a bonus in your workout because you want to have more if you're exercising more intensely. If you're sweating, I'm imagining it's pretty sweaty in there in the last month or so. So I would definitely be drinking more water and basically say, okay, I'm going to drink my half my body weight in ounces throughout the day, but I'm going to drink a bunch of water during my workouts, and that's not going to count towards that 75 ounces or whatever the goal is. If you are drinking extra caffeine and alcohol, you might want to up your intake of fluid just because of that. Caffeine is dehydrating, alcohol is very dehydrating. So if you're someone who does, kind of a glass of wine every night or has a cup like an after dinner drink or something like that, you're going to want to compensate with some more water to help you recover with hydration. All right, so sorry about that. What are your next steps? You're going to take a look at protein for yourself. Where are you at? What is your baseline? And then where do you need to go? Are you already at 100 grams and you need to work towards your lean body weight goal? Or are you at 60 grams and you need to work to get to 100? So my recommendation is to start with where you're at, make it better. And let's just say you do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and let's say you're at 60 grams of protein per day. That's kind of your average. What I would do is I would start by adding maybe 5 grams of protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you get that's another 15 grams right there per day. That's, up to 75. And then kind of sit there for the week, see how you feel, let your body adjust to it, really pay attention to how it's helping your symptoms. And then the next week, how can I add another 5 grams at each meal, roughly? Okay, just do something like that to kind of stair step it, baby step it, make it so sustainable. I don't want you to do things that you have to kind of white knuckle so that you can't keep doing it, because it will only help improve your performance with workouts, your body composition, and many, many other symptoms. Do the same with the plants, produce, and I guess nuts and seeds and grains too. Make sure you kind of see where you're at for your baseline there and then build from there. Okay. You don't have to get to the end goal in a week. Okay. You just need to gradually get there so that it is sustainable, like I was saying. How hydrated are you? Are you not good at carrying a giant Stanley bottle around like everybody does, or the whatever other bottles people are taking around? But it is convenient for you to get all of your hydration in. I will say I was recently in Europe and no one carries big old bottles of water around at all. I don't like no one is probably hydrated. It's just a whole different kind of vibe there. So it'd be interesting to see what their nutrient status is and their hydration status is. But it seems like that is what needs to be done in order to get that in. Let's see, 32-ounce water bottles or 40-ounce water bottles are pretty common. So, just keep filling those up throughout the day. Again, using electrolytes or putting in some, pinch of sea salt, cucumbers, lemon, lime, that kind of thing. That will help with the electrolytes too, to get them that fluid into your cells. There's a concentration gradient that works through with those electrolytes, that how it gets into your cells and actually hydrates you versus you just drinking a bunch of water. And then the thing I haven't really talked about this yet, but this is kind of the final wrap up for all the stuff you're doing, all the efforts you're putting in to take care of yourself with, physically, and then nutritionally, biochemically. We want to also make sure to layer in the mindfulness and maybe some more restorative movement. So if 6 days a week you are pounding yourself at the gym, you want to wrap in some calming types of things too, because stress on the body, even if it's considered kind of a good stress in the form of exercise, it actually can cause symptoms that you may have already before you even start doing this get worse if stress isn't dealt with. And you can physically manage stress a little bit better if you are taking the time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, just to do something more restorative, whether it's stretching, foam rolling, some yoga flow type things, or just some mindfulness, whatever that might look like for you. If it's meditation or prayer or journaling or just reading, whatever it might be, reading for fun, something that's not involving the news or social media or anything that's kind of crazy out there, just be. And that will actually go a long way for layering in steps to make you healthier. All right. Any questions with any of that? Okay. And then if you want any further information or help or support, or want to dig into glucose monitoring or gut health or anything like that, you can reach out to me here. I have a private Facebook group called the Total Health Reset, and then Instagram, I just started that one, Total Health by Tiffany, and then my website. And I am currently accepting Blue Cross Blue Shield Minnesota, the federal employee program through Blue Cross, and then the Blue Card program, TRICARE as well. It needs a referral typically, and there's others pending like Medica and UCare and all that kind of stuff too. So that's all in the works. It's a process, but it's happening. So reach out if you have any questions, and thanks for showing up tonight. All right, take care. Bye-bye.